start. Welcome everybody. It's very weird to be talking and not being able to see you all, but I can tell that you're out there. My name is Mel Kennereg. I'm one of the co-founders and directors of Sheffield Digital, which is the cluster organisation in Sheffield and South Yorkshire. And I've been doing that for a number of years, and the whole topic of digital skills is very close to my heart and really important. I'm joined by Jill McKinney, who's Head of Skills at Sunderland Software City, and Cheryl Plant from Lifelong Learning at Sheffield City Council, where she's Pathways and Progression Manager. And what we're going to do is just run this as a bit of a panel discussion. And as I've said in the chat, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. Make sure you put it in the session chat, not the events chat, because I'm watching the session chat panel. And I think we'll kick off perhaps by just recapping some of the context that we've already heard today, which is that we know there's going to be a rise in unemployment. It's been said that it's going to hit young people particularly hard, but we are going to see, older people being thrown out of their jobs and not having something new to go to. So there's a question around what do we do with all these people who are going to be unemployed? But there's also going to be an increasing demand for digital skills among businesses that are moving more rapidly than they expected to adopt digital ways of working. So there's a question of how do we marry those two demands in order to benefit the economy as a whole and provide opportunities for people. So I wanted to just kick off with a question for our panelists, which is, what kind of skills should we actually be training people in? When we talk about digital skills, reskilling and training, what is it we're actually talking about?
I think there's a couple of answers to that, actually. And the first one would be looking at people who maybe don't consider themselves to be digitally minded. They've maybe not studied digital subjects at school or college. But so it would be, for those people, it would be the early stage digital. So maybe looking at, bearing in mind the point you've just made about digital adoption and businesses changing focus and using different technologies as part of their everyday working now. I think it's really important that people understand how to use general office technology to the best that they can, to be able to, use Excel, use Word, use Zoom, and other technologies that suddenly people are having to use, have been thrust into this situation where we're working from home. People are kind of fumbling their way through. So there is some kind of, I don't want to call it basic because it's not, it's just a different technical skill. And then the other answer for me would be to have a look at how businesses are adapting to this situation. And we had a discussion a little while ago about businesses pivoting and changing their services and products to meet the demands that's been brought about by COVID, but also a lot of review of happening in the businesses just to see what skills they actually do need moving forward. I think it's giving people a bit of headspace to look at that. So there is some more, the in-depth technical skills that people would need to develop in terms of, software development, coding, that kind of thing.
What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
I completely agree with all of those things, and I hold my hands up. I'm not a digital specialist. I'm a good all-rounder, as it were. But when we've looked recently as a local authority at what generally the skills that are needed transferably across all occupations at the moment to complement that digital development skill, we looked over the last 90 days at the jobs that were advertised across South Yorkshire, and the key skills that were advertised in there were things like customer service, teamwork, sales, budgeting, project skills, staff management. And these are all things that are quite easy for people to understand how they might be able to transfer it across. So I suppose my angle on this really isn't necessarily from a digital perspective, but more thinking about if we are looking to encourage people to move over from other areas into this field, how can we entice them using some of those other skills that wrap around the digital skills development?
I think that's a really interesting point, because it's quite often hard if you've not been exposed to working with digital. Trying to understand what that actually means and what employers are looking for is extremely difficult. So highlighting those skills that are transferable and explaining how they are transferable into a digital setting is one of the things that we need to do. Jill, is there anything, I know Sunderland Software City runs a lot of skills initiatives. Is there anything that you've done in the past that you think is particularly relevant here?
In terms of developing skills?
Particularly in terms of helping people understand what's transferable.
Yeah, we run a couple of different programs. But I think the main purpose of the program really is the awareness piece, and it is to help people understand what, it's not just digital employers, it's employers across the board, and businesses that are now using digital as part of their jobs. They are looking at similar skill sets, and it is around, although I hate the term, I've yet to find something to replace it, but the softer skills, being able to communicate, to work as a team, to be agile, the attitude that people need, the ability to learn, and just having that kind of professional presence. It's surprising that although for a lot of us that's common sense and straightforward, for people who maybe are a little bit distant from the labour market for whatever reason, it's not something that they're aware of, and it is just that reminder of, and sometimes to just overtly show people this is what you need to do. So as part of the programs that we run, we embed that right the way through. Just even the ability to talk to people, present your work, and demonstrate, the skills that you have in an interview situation is a huge part of that as well.
And do you imagine that people who are being made unemployed because of the pandemic, are they going to need help with those sorts of skills and seeing how they apply in a digital role, or how they would use digital to enable those sorts of roles?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's probably a bit of a sweeping statement to say everybody, because it's very dependent on where they've come from. But in a lot of cases, people are coming from traditional working environments, and they may have been there for a long time. So even preparing a CV is very daunting, although it's a very archaic way of applying for a job. It's still what employers look for. Even the thought of writing a CV is very daunting for some people. So just a little bit of guidance around the language to use is quite valuable to people. But yeah, I do think there is definitely a need for people just to have that little reminder and just an arm around their shoulder to say, look, there's some support here for you, and we can help you translate your skills. Like Cheryl was saying earlier, you've got some skills probably that are relevant to the jobs that we're looking to fill. Let's have a look and see how they translate and how you can transfer them into those jobs.
So it sounds to me that there's a big part of sort of basic careers advice and guidance that's going to be needed here before we even start getting into actually upskilling people in terms of their digital capability. Cheryl, what kind of routes exist to do that, or are we going to have to invent those from scratch?
I think there's quite a bit of assistance around the careers guidance angle, as nationally the National Careers Service has been put in place for open access for adults. There are career services linked in every local authority area too. So anybody interested in making those connections, I advise you to reach out to those and promote any training that you're doing, just to make those advice professionals aware of anything that you are promoting. And I think that also links in quite closely with the job centres as well. We know we've seen a massive increase in the number of people that have applied for universal credit, but not everybody thinks to advertise their job roles with the job centre. And so there's a number of conversations. The careers service, adult guidance careers services work really closely with the job centres. So again, just thinking about connecting in with those organisations and services that are available. The progression pathways and the learning pathways that's out there, we are anticipating an announcement from the government in the near future about an apprenticeship deal of some kind. And we're starting to see more and more apprenticeship frameworks across digital areas come into play. And that's something in Sheffield that we're particularly keen to support and to look at and work with our employers locally about opening up those routeways. Because ultimately we want to progress individuals into employment, but quite often there's a degree of work, as Jill was saying, that needs to happen beforehand to get people ready. So that kind of pre-employment activity. Our Opportunity Sheffield service in Sheffield has done some really good test work around using a traineeship model to prepare adults for apprenticeship pathways and moving into employment. And I think as part of those training packages, it's really been important to think about how we are not just teaching as I was saying earlier, not just teaching the digital elements of any activities, but also improving people's confidence around their ability to move into a new area. And I think as somebody who's 40, I know I don't look it, and I've got 30 years left in employment potentially, I could quite keenly consider another vocational pathway and another vocational route. But what is it that would make me want to consider something else? And what else would help me to move away if my sector was vulnerable at this point as a result of COVID? What else would encourage me to move away into a different sector and give me that reassurance that I'd be able to do something similar or be able to progress quite quickly as well? So the training and the learning packages are just as important as the employment availability. And sorry, lastly, I think barrier removal is part of this too.
Yeah.
So understanding individuals' financial circumstances, what other kinds of support that they might need. We're seeing a lot of people returning to learning and into work with high levels of trauma and bereavement as a result of being confined in environments that might not necessarily be positive environments, or having suffered a loss, a bereavement loss as a result of COVID as well. And it's all those other sorts of things that we've really got to think about in terms of the well-being of the training and moving people around. That are we addressing those needs and those considerations as much as we are the digital element too?
Thank you for that, Cheryl. We've been talking quite a lot about, we don't want to call them basic digital skills, but I suppose we could say enabling digital skills. Apologies. But there's a good question here from Diane Milne, who asks, we're interested in the higher level skills that our existing and future digital companies are needing, coding, testing, project management, etc. How do we develop our own talent and attract talent to the city? Any views on the delivery of these higher level skills?
I think that's a really, really good point. And I think it does begin kind of early on in education. I think the first thing we've got to do is raise awareness. There's a huge disconnect between digital as a job and digital as a thing. Your mobile phone, your smartwatch, your PC, whatever. And younger people, they have all this technology at their fingertips, but there is a huge gap in the understanding that they could, there is a job that sits behind this. So I think the first point is that we need a huge piece on awareness. It does start early on. I think we've got to start drip feeding that through at primary age and continue bringing that message into schools right the way through to sixth form, and then continue on the message into colleges, so that even those that have chosen it as an option understand that there are opportunities for them. But then I think there is what I always describe as the hidden layer of talent. The people who have taught themselves to code, the people who sit in their bedrooms and hack into banks, these are the people we need to catch. These are the people we need to, you know, have in our classrooms so we can help them understand where their skill fits within the economy, and start feeding them into these new businesses or existing businesses that need these skills.
Cheryl?
I agree with all the things that Jill just mentioned, and interestingly, I was looking at some demographics around this industry, digital industry, and the need now for people at that level to move into the job roles. So whilst I completely agree with Jill with everything that she's been saying in terms of getting that pipeline, it does feel like there's an imminent need now to move people across. And actually 30%, and according to the McKinsey report, 30% of our future workforce is already in work. So if we think about it from that perspective, which is a dual approach in terms of encouraging people from across other sectors into this area, as much as it is developing that pipeline from a young person's perspective too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a session that follows this one, which looks specifically at young people and digital skills. So I don't want to hijack our conversation and take it into that one. I do think, to your point about attracting people up across from different sectors, I wonder what the role is for business in all of this. I know that this event, you know, the audience is primarily more public sector and education, but Diane in the chat has made the point about needing to get people working in the sector into schools to talk to the young people, but surely there's also something that people working in the sector need to do to showcase what they do and what it's like and who they are to other adults, to sort of, as you say, entice them into the sector. Do either of you have any thoughts on how to enable that in a unclunky way? Because at the moment, I think the engagement of business in the skills agenda tends to be very clunky, and I wonder if anyone's got some examples of where it's working really well.
Although I don't want to use this as a sales pitch at all, and I know I've already talked about one of our programs, but is it just as an example of something that we're doing? We have a program that's a 5-day boot camp, and that is for anybody to attend, regardless of, you know, from 18 plus age group, regardless of whether they've got experience or qualification or what background they come from. And that is industry led. So we engage with industry across every element of that. They set us a challenge so that the learners can work on something technical. But we incorporate the business in every part of that. So they come in and they meet people and they talk to them about their job and what they do and what they enjoy about it and the things they don't like about it. And we take them out to businesses so they can see how that's working. But there are also other initiatives that are set up to encourage that kind of relationship. So you've got things such as the Tech Talent Charter, which is, you're probably familiar with, that is industry-led as also, but also encourages people who are not in the industry to get involved so that it can meet the needs of people. They do have a specific focus around females in tech, but there are other initiatives similar that are all encompassing that would engage with the wider community as well. So there are some things going on. To touch on the school thing, I think you're absolutely right. It's imperative that it comes from the horse's mouth, that we get businesses, industry representatives into education across the board, not stopping at school age, or right the way up to university, so that people can really get to grips with what their opportunities are and how they can translate their skills. And it's about how, you know, how business leaders can inspire people to follow that route, and you know, just raise that whole awareness across the board so we can create a bit of spark. It is sometimes, you know, you can't do what you can't see, and if you don't see it, it's a bit of a hidden sector because a lot of it happens behind the scenes, and the finished product is the thing, you know, a website that you go on to, or an app that you have on your phone, or, you know, quite often you wouldn't associate that with a job. So it is just that awareness piece, but absolutely business is crucial to this moving forward.
Mm. In Sheffield, we have a not-for-profit organisation called the Developer Academy that offers kind of short, basic training courses in things like, thank you, Rob Walker, for also putting that in the chat, short introductory courses to get people kind of to have a go at coding or web development, but then other courses that build on them. And Rob's also mentioned TechSet Go, which is a project where people have an opportunity just to come and try some stuff out. And it's very much targeted at communities where people would be very unlikely to consider a career in the tech sector. It tries to engage particularly with underrepresented groups in the sector. I'm interested.
Can I just add something into this this conversation, because I think when we've been looking at the difference across sectors, I mean, this point in time, we know that digital and health and social care are probably some of the more viable sectors and industries that are looking for people at the moment. But again, transferability across those two sectors. And when we talk to young people and when we talk to adults about what makes you want to find out more about an opportunity, research tells us that 4 or more employer encounters means that significantly helps to raise that awareness. So I think there's definitely something in there building in those encounters that you were talking about. But also, if we are looking at transferring from other industries or trying to attract people that are currently unemployed, understanding the motivations for the job that people are undertaking. So what is it about your job that makes you get out of bed in the morning? And how can I understand, as somebody that's from health and social care, for example, my skill set across to digital? And looking at some of the job descriptions that I've seen, generally we have a list of all the technical qualifications that are required, but we don't make sure that that language is perhaps understandable. So if I was to look at something cold, like a systems architect, I'd perhaps associate that with architecture as opposed to digital.
Yeah.
And so I think there's definitely something there about how we help the language and the aspiration and inspiration for these job roles to become more inclusive across our promotion and our activity, and just be mindful of that as we're trying to attract people in.
I agree.
Sorry, yeah.
I've just noticed that Rob Walker's put something in there about we need to be clear that we don't need a degree in computer science to work in tech. Absolutely, fundamentally. And we need to be talking to businesses about the wording of their job applications and actually supporting them to revisit their recruitment processes, because some of them are a bit out of date, I'll say that openly, and they still require a degree in computer science, but couldn't answer the question, why would you need that if somebody's got the experience? So I think it is our role as well to support them in understanding how to successfully recruit.
That's an excellent point. So we've talked a lot about attracting people in, helping them to see how their skills can transfer across. The little bit of the puzzle that's missing is how do we quite quickly fill the gap that they might have in their skills? So when we're talking about these higher level roles, we've got someone with transferable skills where there is a match, but they're maybe just missing one particular chunk that will make the difference to the employer on whether to hire them or not. How do we identify those chunks, and how do we fill those gaps quickly?
We're both poised to talk next. Cheryl, do you want to go first?
And I think for me, that is absolutely about ensuring real collaboration in the design and the development of our learning programs locally. So connecting in with our local learning providers, looking at what is needed from a curriculum side of things, and how we can make that work to absolutely address the gaps that we have. So are there specific recruitment pathways or things that we need to do around specialist skills, a recruitment to do an intense piece of work around Python, for example, or picking on any of the things where we have a real understanding of the demand from employers, because ultimately somebody won't join a learning program unless they know it's going to lead to a job. And the people aren't going to move into a job if we don't get the learning program right. So it's definitely about finding that balance, in my opinion.
Yeah,
co-creation.
The Institute of Coding, Newcastle University is part of the Institute of Coding, have a conversion degree. So people who do already have a lot of skills, transferable skills, the conversion degree is there to support them to specialise. So as any other apprenticeship works, they need to be in work, and then the university will support them to intensify that particular skill set. That has been developed with industry. They've been a huge part of that. So it's been designed so that it's general, so that people have access to it, but there's also an understanding that it needs to be quite focused in particular areas, and it's very flexible and adaptable to meet the needs of the business as well.
That's fantastic. So we've got 5 minutes left, and I've been asked to inquire of my panelists, and I'd also ask this of the people in the audience, please put something in the chat, is if there was one thing that either local government or national government could and should do about this, the whole area of reskilling and retraining to enable a digital workforce, what should that one thing be? And I think saying throw lots of money at it is probably not allowed, because that's too obvious. I'd be interested to know, Jill and Cheryl, is there a one thing on the top of your wish list?
I think the first thing is to recognise that it's a problem. As part of the government 7-point recovery plan for COVID, digital skills was not mentioned. Maths and English, yes, they were and are very important. As is digital skills, as important as maths and English. So for me, the one thing that needs to change is a recognition that we are in this industrial revolution that is digital, that it underpins most every sector. And if we do not have a pipeline of talent, then there's going to be a problem later on down the line.
And I think my one thing would be to make it as easy as possible for people to move around sectors, and either that be looking at the conversion of qualifications across different sectors, like Jill mentioned earlier, looking at barrier removal in terms of packages of support that might help somebody that might need to take a reduction in salary to train up over an amount of time, and just really understanding the needs of the individual and make it easier for that individual to make that choice, to have the confidence to make that choice. That'd be my one. Well, it was going to be one thing and it turned out to be three. So.
That's totally enough. I will give you that. Okay, so I've been asked to let everybody know that there is a poll. I don't know what's on it. I haven't looked at it yet, but please do have a look at the poll and participate in it. I wanted to say a huge thank you to Jill and to Cheryl for joining me this morning and taking the load off my shoulders and talking about this very big topic, which actually I'm sure we could have spoken about all day. And I hope everyone who's been listening has found that useful. We are producing a report after this event, so all of this learning will be encapsulated. If you're sticking around, and I hope you are, their next sessions are on digital for young people in school and leaving education, the future of space, how will offices and co-working spaces change, and economic growth and digital adoption, why and how. And those will start in a couple of minutes. So I think at this point I will say thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, big thank you, Jill and Cheryl. I hope you've enjoyed it. I certainly have enjoyed it.
Thank you.